Hello everybody, Epic Talks here, and let's just get into the review, because I know that you guys just want to know my thoughts on this movie. So, my opening thoughts before going into this movie, I was expecting it to be quite average, but I knew I was going to enjoy the monster fights, as I usually do with MonsterVerse movies. I personally did not really enjoy King of the Monsters. Over time, I grew to kind of dislike it, but overall, I still have somewhat of an attachment to it now. Uh, I'd say the biggest problems with this movie are definitely the characters and the pacing. The pacing's issues are mainly due to the editing, also because of how much stuff they have to cram into this 2-hour-long movie. It's probably like an hour and 40 minutes if you don't count the credits. The movie's characters they're fine. They're definitely much more likable and much more tolerable than almost any of the other MonsterVerse movies. Some of them are actually likable. My favorites are Bernie and Gia. I do think that a lot of them are wasted, especially Ren, Bernie, and to Nathan to somewhat of an extent. Nathan has a character arc, but his arc is not completed. It is not developed. He is shown to be a coward, and then he saves Kong, but we don't see the development of why he wants to save him. He just kind of does it, which is unfortunate because Nathan, again, is a likable character, and to see his arc not really go anywhere is kind of upsetting. Now, the pacing issues. The pacing is really weird. I think mainly it's due to the issue of Madison and Josh's story. They kind of make it so that the pacing is really off because of how much we have to cut away to them and how much we can't sync in everything with everyone else. Another problem that I'd say is somewhat minor. Not actually, no, it's not minor at all. Godzilla. Godzilla is almost entirely reactive in this story. Everything that Godzilla does is just to either enforce the Mechagodzilla plot or to enforce Kong's plot. The only thing that he kind of does that isn't completely reactive is burning through the hollow earth. Now, obviously, Godzilla is... this is obviously not his movie. I think it's quite obvious that this is basically KSI 2. I don't know if that was already obvious enough. But Godzilla's really not the most important thing here, which is upsetting because, Godzilla is supposed to be another main kaiju, and you'd think that he would have a subplot or something about him. He does get kind of mentioned in the beginning with Mark and Madison, and Madison and Josh and Bernie are on a subplot to find out why Mechagodzilla's attacking, and they do end up finding why he's attacking, but they don't do anything about it. They just stand there and kind of fritz Mechagodzilla at the end, which isn't even important because you can cut that out. So they pretty much do nothing for the plot besides find Mechagodzilla. And honestly, you could have Mechagodzilla built up in development to the point where not only the human antagonist, I don't remember his name, and Ren are more developed instead of those three. And either way, Madison is only there for character continuity. Now, this movie is definitely not all bad, and I don't want to sound like I hate this movie, but the reason why I'm talking about all these problems is due to the fact that so many people are giving this movie, I want to say, too much praise. Now, I would consider this movie above average. I would consider it good. Not great, but I do love this movie. Personally, I love this movie. It is it is tied for my favorite kaiju movie. Um, I want to say a lot of great things about this movie, so let's just get into that before people start typing. Um, the monster action is incredible. I loved every fight. Originally, my favorite fight was the aircraft carrier fight because that was the one that I was the least spoiled for. Then it became the Hong Kong fight, and it's kind of iffy on the final battle or Hong Kong. I think I want to go with the final battle. Everything with Kong and the Hollow Earth is pretty much perfect. I love visual storytelling, and with the Hollow Earth, I think that's great. Like, I just want the MonsterVerse to do more of that. The visual storytelling is impeccable. Gia is probably the best character, just because she says what the audience is thinking she says. She has a role, she has a purpose, but she doesn't go anywhere. She doesn't have an arc, which she doesn't need one. She doesn't have to drive the story that much. She does drive it, but she doesn't have to drive it that much. So, her not having a character arc is completely fine. Also, the cinematography in this movie is gorgeous. It is so good. It is almost just as good as as I'm gonna compare this to Pacific Rim a lot because I have watched Pacific Rim a lot lately, but it is almost just as good as Pacific Rim, if not on the same level. The CG is not the best of the MonsterVerse, but it is definitely up there. It's almost just as good as KSI. It is almost. I'd say in some parts it does look better, but it is almost just as good. The soundtrack is pretty good. I keep saying, because I'm not really scripting this, I'm just looking at these notes that I have as I go along. But the soundtrack is pretty good. I want to say it's good. It's solid. But the main qualm that I have with the soundtrack is that it does repeat itself a lot, which I don't necessarily have the biggest issue with. I personally enjoy this movie's soundtrack more than King of the Monsters. King of the Monsters has a great soundtrack, but it's so bombastic and loud and all the time that you never get to have a moment of clarity and peace throughout that movie. So that's why with this I'm more fine with the more, I guess, watered down tone of the soundtrack. My final thoughts on this movie, it's a fun flick. I've watched this movie many times. I've watched it 3 times now. 3 times? 4 times. 3 times. Once with my family, twice with my friends. I'm going to say that this is probably my second favorite monster movie. My score for it, my objective score, which is basically my factual score, I'd say I would give this movie a 5.5 out of 10, a 5.5 or a 6. I'm gonna keep it at a 5.5 because the problems that I do mention are pretty essential to film, and my personal score, I'm going to give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. I love this movie. I think it's not perfect. It's not great, but I personally just really like watching it. I've had a lot of fun talking about this with my friends. I didn't even mention Mechagodzilla. All I'm gonna say is that Mechagodzilla was great. He was a great villain. Better, much better than King Ghidorah, and honestly, the most almost like the most fleshed out MonsterVerse villains that we've had yet. I would even almost go to the debate of him being one of the most fleshed out Godzilla villains. So yeah. But as I said, 8.5, my personal rating, my subjective rating. Again, I love this movie. I think it's great. So don't get any ideas of me disliking this movie because I said that the characters were bad and saying that the pacing was bad. I love this movie. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts on Godzilla vs. Kong was. I hope you loved it as much as I did. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.